So yeah, once we're done with PHP, we will get into object-oriented programming, but in the context of Java. The same idea though. I mean, just like every language is going to have a loop. Any OOP language is going to have a class. They're going to have some form of inheritance, some form of encapsulation, etc. So same ideas can be applied to pretty much any OOP language. And
Really?
and PHP is an OOP language. It has classes. It's got, but it's kind of what was done as kind of an afterthought. So I'll show you classes, of course, in PHP, but we'll focus more on classes in Java.
Are we kind of like learning the other part of it, like future and other courses, or
In learn what?
part? I don't know, like in Russian it's called paradigm, or like object-oriented is like one of the way of writing code, and then there's functional part.
There's functional. There's procedural.
Yeah,
C is procedural.
yeah.
Functional. Certainly, you would take a programming language course like 322, where you look at all the paradigms. I think you do 6 languages or something like that. You dabble in 6 languages, or maybe it's only 4 or 6. I don't know. But like functional programming languages would be like Scheme and Lisp of it, or Haskell. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh no, I'm just adjusting my.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. So we were working on. So remember, we are online, and we do have questions and answers for those of you that are doing this online through Piazza. It looks like we've got. A good broadcast going, unlike this morning. But we'll go ahead and continue with PHP today. We left it off with, I believe, command line arguments. Reading those in and converting them explicitly if they're integers or doubles. Now, what about file I/O? So this is going to look very, very familiar if you're coming from a C background, because in fact, it simply just steals the functions from C to do it. Let's do some file input. File input. It's the same basic as in C. You have 3 steps. Open the file, process it, close it. Right? And so since it's from C, of course, you can use the C functions to do this. Let me go ahead and open up a file for, if I have a file name, say data.txt or something like that. This is in general, this is for text processing. Of course, if you could do binary processing if you want, but I'd say if you're going to do binary processing, you might as well bring in a library to do that. If you want to do image processing, you don't want to build from the ground up and implement the GIF standard or the JPEG standard or something like that. Use some sort of a library to do it. So there's my file input. You can you can check if a file exists using a function called, what do you think it's called? File exists, right? And you can provide it a file name. And that's going to return true or false. If it returns false, say, then we don't want to process the file because we're doing input, reading from a file, and so we can't do it if it doesn't exist. So if it doesn't exist, we'll go ahead and exit with an error message or some sort. That you cannot open the file, and we'll go ahead and exit. Like we did with command line arguments. If we don't provide enough command line arguments, then we can exit on them. I guess I don't have it in the notes for some reason, but you can use the C function exit with an error code is what I'm doing here. Generally, remember that 0 is associated with no error. Non-zero is associated with some error. An error of type 1, an error of type 2, an error of type 3, etc. Right? But otherwise, if a file doesn't exist, obviously you can't open it. Now, in C, what was the function that we used to open a file in C? Fopen, or fopen or fopen. I don't know if that's universal pronunciation or not, but that's what I do. And then, of course, you can open up the file name for some mode. In this case, we want to read it. You can open up a file for writing. You can open up a file for appending. I'm going to keep it simple, though. But in C, it returns a file pointer, right? It's something that looks like this is what it returns in C. We don't have pointers in PHP. C, C++ are some of the few languages that actually have memory pointers. But it does return a pointer to the file. It starts at the top of the file, and then as you read line by line or character by character or whatever, it advances the pointer where it is pointing in the file. But in PHP, we call those handles, right? Get a file handle. And that's why I'm calling it H here. It doesn't matter if you call it H or not. You can call input, in file, F, something like that. But I've opened up the file, and now I can read a line. How do we read a line using the C library? fgets, right? And we can use that here. I just simply pass it the handle, and then I can store that off into a variable, the line, right? Now, in C, you would have to worry about, is it big enough to read the entire line? And in fact, fgets has more inputs to it, right? It not only reads the file, but where you're putting the stuff into, and also a limitation on how many bytes you want to read, because of course you don't want a buffer overflow. There's no such thing in PHP. It'll dynamically allocate more memory for you automatically. You of course can you can read one line of the input. You can remove the end line character, because like in C, character, there we go. In C, it does retain the end line character at the end. So if you don't want that there, you can you could go, of course, find out how long the string is, jump immediately to the end, and cut off that end line character. Or even easier, you can go ahead and trim out the entire thing, right? So I want to trim out all leading and trailing white space from the line entirely. So that if it had 50 spaces at the end and then the end line character, all 50 spaces and the end line character would then be trimmed out, and you wouldn't have to worry about any of it at all. Trim is what you want. Okay. How do you go into a loop to read every single line, right? So to read until the end of the file, right? Hint, end of the file, while, F, EOF, right? Remember, end of file, right? That'll return true if it's at the end of the file. That handle reaches the end of the file. So while we're not at the end of the file, then we'll read a line, right? Forgets H, and then we can print it out, do whatever we want to it. Let's go ahead and trim it. Trim line, and then I'm just going to print it in this case. %s and the line. Right? And that's it, right? So it'll read line after line after line. If you want to, if you're reading CSV data, for example, video game data, like in your third exercise in your first assignment, then instead of printing out each line, you would explode or split or preg explode your line to get each one of those tokens. Okay? Probably explode is what you want since it's the simplest. Once you're done, what do you need to do with the file to make sure that everything's hunky-dory? You need to close it, and for that, it would be for close. Again, stolen from C. Why? It's there. I'm Rasmus Lerdorf 25 years ago. I just want a dancing baby on my web page. I don't want to have to worry about rewriting basic file I/O. So I'm just going to, I wrote everything in C already. I'm just going to steal everything that's already there, right? But there are some convenience methods, right? One of the few things that I do like about PHP is its file I/O convenience methods, where if I want the entire contents of the entire file in one line, you can do that. Contents, and this is PHP, contents equals file get contents, and then I'll provide the file name, and that's it. Right, one-liner, get the entire file, load it all up into memory at once. Now, of course, all those end-line characters are still there, so if you want to split it, you can explode it based on the end-line character. That will give you an array of lines, and then you can go through and process each line separately. Yeah? Oh, no, okay. All right. File output is even easier. File output. Well, yeah, I'll just show you as an example here. Of course, if we wanted to output a file, we would use, again, fopen, provide the file name, and then the mode. In this case, if we were outputting to a file, we would be writing, so reading, writing, and arithmetic, not the 3 R's, but W in this case for writing. And then, of course, I almost gave it away. What are we going to use for file output in C? Printf goes to the standard output, so fprintf is going to go to the file output. And we just simply provide the handle and whatever we want to print. This is some output. Right? If you wanted to print variable values, fprintf, you would, again, use out. And then if you wanted to format it, you know, %d, tab over, %.2f, and I'll provide 42 and 89.4. Right, there we go. Right. So anything that you've ever done with printf can be done with file fprintf as well. And then, of course, what you do at the end, but close it. Yeah. Yeah, that's just a tab. I'm tabbing over. Space. There. There we go. Put some more white space around there. And so there is a convenience method here. The convenience method is, what do you think? If the other convenience method was file get contents, this would be, here's my output equals hello world. You know, formulate a string, whatever you want to do. Just dump one big giant string out to one file in one line. It's just going to be simply file put contents. Contents. There we go. Output. And this is actually going to be the output file, outfile.txt. And then the output that you just simply want to dump to it. The reason I like these convenience methods is because somewhat cool. Things that you can do with it. For that, I'm going to go over here to my command line and go into PHP mode here. I don't know why, but online it's always saying this is a syntax error, that just ignore it. It's not. Yeah?
What's the use of using fprintf if you could just use like file put contents all the time?
Because you need more than one way to skin a cat, right? You want for flexibility, for convenience to do things multiple different ways depending on what you want. I mean, if you're going to use file put contents, you still have to go through some sort of a loop to build your big giant string of output, and then dump it. And there might also be file lock issues. I forget that I'm not thinking about, and one has more flexibility than the other. With flexibility, with simplicity, of course, you lose flexibility because there's only one way of doing it. So it's always a trade-off in design. Right? A somewhat cool thing that you can do, though, is use file get contents and put contents if you want to read from an arbitrary protocol on your network. In this case, I'll just go ahead and go with my website, pittsburgh.unl.edu, and let's go ahead and print my web page. Print f%s. Now, it's going to be a bunch of garbage HTML probably, saying that you're not Firefox, you're not Chrome. I'm not going to deliver the actual web page to you. Let's see what it actually gives us. Oh, wow, okay. I imagine that REPL has firewalled their stuff into oblivion, so this is probably not going to work on this interface. That's all right. Let's go ahead and try it here. Oops. Let's go ahead. Well, certainly it'll work on CSE. Let's try it. And I forget what was in foo.php. Oh, nothing. Okay. HP. There we go. There's my web page. Beautiful, right? Well, web pages are more data than readable stuff nowadays. But there, you saw mail to, I can find mail to. There's my email. It's sitting somewhere on that page. If you went to chrisburke.unl.edu and actually rendered it with a, there we go, and actually rendered it with a web browser, then it would look like this instead. The raw HTML here, let's look at the source, view page source. There's the raw HTML. There's all those down at the bottom. There's all that data and numbers that was just appearing as a bunch of garbage. Right? So you can also use arbitrarily. You can use this is arbitrary. You can actually do any network protocol that you want. So if you want to do file transfer, SFTP or FTP, any protocol that you put in front of that will work, as long as there's support for it in that language. But you can get arbitrary stuff. You can post like you did in your first lab, where you submit data to the server so that it computes how many days are left until your birthday. That's posting to a website. That's basically putting data into a website, so you can use file put contents as well. Right? So it's kind of cool. There are easier ways of doing it though, but it's kind of cool that it uses it, that it does it natively with these functions. You can post or get an arbitrary protocol over the network. Example, HTTP, or in this case, HTTPS. Right? All right, questions about file I/O? Otherwise, you'll be doing file input, but probably not file output so much. PHP does have functions, of course. And here's where it gets kind of a little bit murky because of how PHP does its function. Lots of dynamic programming languages do functions like this. But you can declare a function using the, surprise, surprise, function keyword. All right, so let's go ahead and create a function over here in this REPL web page here. So the way that I can create a function is simply by saying, here is this function. Let's call it, for lack of a better name, let's just call it foo. Right? It may or may not take inputs, parameters, and then you provide curly brackets to say what it does. Unlike C, there are no prototypes. I think I mentioned hoisting before. It doesn't matter where you put the function definition before or after you use it. The interpreter will go through and hoist up all of those functions to the global scope on its first when it first loads up your script. So if I go and say just print hello, right there, that's the only thing that, oops, that's not what I want. That's the only thing that this function does. I'll show you that you can call it up here. I think you should be able to do both of these things. You can call it before or after you actually define the function, right? All right, so function and then the name foo. But here's the weird thing. That's the same. All caps foo is the same. That's the same. In other words, they are case insensitive. The function names are case insensitive. I think, I could be wrong, but I think that this is the only language that I know of that does this. Why? Because of HTML. HTML tags are case insensitive, so he brought that into this language for some reason. Right? Don't ask me why. But you can declare a function. You can declare it anywhere. Right? All function names are case insensitive. Right? Like, what the hell? Why? But to make sure that you retain your sanity, still use the lower camel casing convention. Advice, still use the lower camel casing convention everywhere. If you want to make your code really, really unreadable, go ahead and just Wild West it and SpongeBob alt cap it everywhere, and then it's not readable at all anymore, right? But don't do that. go with a lower camel casing convention. So if this is some function, right, then it would be lowercase s, uppercase f. What happens when you call a function that doesn't exist? Fatal error. Not just a warning, it actually just dies. Okay? Foo. I'll change it back to foo here. Right? Okay, well, what about parameters? If this were C, I would say that I want an integer parameter, a double parameter, and a string parameter. Int, A, double, B. Except that we don't have those keywords in PHP. If you want two parameters, so be it. A, comma, B. Right? And we'll go ahead and assume that those are numbers. So, result is equal to A plus B. And then we'll return it. Actually, we won't do anything. We'll go, value is equal to, or result is equal to %d and the line, and result. So I'm going to go ahead and pass in 10 and 20. And so it should compute the result, 30. Hello, result is equal to 30, and be done. Right? Except what? Let's run it. Hey, okay, it works. I did not have a return value here because, of course, it was a void function. But I didn't put void up here, did I? Nope. I didn't say that it returned a double either. What's its return type? Again, dynamic typing. It's whatever you return. So if I somehow just return nothing, then it's then on that particular call, it's a void function. I could return the result. Now, is this returning an integer? Let's go ahead and capture the result and print it out down here. R equals %d and the line R. Yeah, it was, but that's because we gave it integers. I'm going to give it 10 and 20.5. Oops, and of course now, if I treat that as it was going to be truncation because of the formatting here, but if I put %f, now its return type is magically a double. What's going to happen here? I don't know. Well, let's walk through it here. Plus is not concatenation, so it'll try to treat this as a type juggling. It'll be 0. So 10 plus 0 is going to end up being 10. It's probably going to work. Right? Yep. There was a little bit of a warning in that the type juggling occurred, but it's not a fatal error. Right? So I could of course change this so that that I do a string concatenation. Hello, right? That would screw it up down here. I'd have to treat it as a string now in the formatting, but you can do something like that. I don't want to do that. But here, let me show you something even worse. Or I'm only going to give it 10. There is no B. What's going to happen here? Oh, PHP fatal error. Okay, this is because it's a recent PHP. Yep. Old school PHP would mean that you didn't provide a B, so B it's missing, so what's missing? Null. When you add something to null, it's going to be that something, because null is going to be treated as 0, and then we'll go on with our day. Right? But if I restore that, it's all good again. But oops, I provided 3. It doesn't expect 3, does it? It expects 2. And now it's fine again, right, with that. Why? Because all function parameters are essentially optional in PHP. This is also true of Java, or JavaScript, sorry, definitely not true of Java. Where if you don't provide the parameter, then rules start taking over. And by the way, if you don't have prototypes in C, same thing happens. If you in C, if you've got a function that takes 3 parameters, you don't have a prototype, so it doesn't. The preprocessor doesn't know what to do with it. And then later on, you end up calling the function with only 2 parameters. It is fine for you to do that. It's just that that third parameter some rules take over on what the default values are. In PHP, the default value, at least old school PHP, the default value should be null, in which case it's treated as 0, but now it's a fatal error, right? So what you can do is you can make parameters optional. If you don't provide a b, I will provide one for you. Say 42, just so that we have something demonstrably different, right? And now, if I now, of course, if I call it with 10 and 20, then the result is as before. Because you provided both of those things, fine, I'll use the values that you gave me. But if you only give me 1, then the default value takes over for 42, and now the answer should be 52. Right? That's the syntax up here. It's just the assignment operator. It's providing a default. Do you remember when we looked at the explode function or the split function or the substring function, and I told you that those square brackets meant that the parameter was optional? That's how this works. If you don't provide them, then one will be provided for you so that you can define different behavior. You don't have function overloading in that's an object-oriented programming kind of concept that we'll talk about when we get to OOP. But since you don't have function overloading, you can only ever have one function named foo. Even if you want to provide it multiple parameters, well, you can't, but you can if you treat them as optional and provide some sensible defaults. I could provide a null as a sensible default here, in which case it'll probably be coerced to 0, and the result here would be 10. Yep, no errors at all. Of course, if I restore that back to 32, now it's 42 as a result. And if I provide a third one, 101, well, it's ignored, right? Because I don't actually use it in here. If I provide plus C, right? Now I'll go back to that PHP fatal error. Undefined variable C. All right. Fine, I'll put that in the, there we go. That, okay, it's because I'm providing it. Now if I don't provide it, now it'll be a PHP error, right? Yep. But if I provide an option for this one, say that the default value here is going to be 101. So now it's 10, 32, so that's 42, 53, 153? 143. Yeah, duh. 10 plus 32 is only 42. Sorry. Bad math. Order matters here. So if you, the ones at the end are the most optional. The ones at the beginning are the most required, right? So if you have optional parameters, they have to come at the end. Right? Otherwise, how do you know that, oh, this parameter is optional. A is optional, but B is required. Okay, how do you know when I only provide one argument that I meant that it should be that one, especially if you have 3 or 4 or 5, right? That's why there's order there that matters, right? So those are optional parameters. I'll put that in the notes for you. PHP parameters can be made optional, or you can provide a default value. Right? And here is the example that we just did. There. What about, let me go ahead and show the canonical example here of a swapping function. So we're going to swap the values of A and B. First of all, let's print them to see that we actually have values. %d and B is equal to %d. We'll assume that they're integers. It doesn't really matter for the purposes of this example. A and B. I'll print those out. I will go ahead and establish 2 other values here, x and y. Oops. And then I will print those out. X, y, x, y prior to the swap. I guess I don't need this print statement in the swap at all. Prior to the swap, then we'll go ahead and call swap and see if it's actually swapped. A and B, or X and Y. Okay. So how do I swap them? Well, I'll put 1 into a temporary value. I'll put into A the value of B, I'll put into the, back into B, the value stored in that temporary value, and then I'll return. Right? So guesses. Are they going to be properly swapped or not? Nope. So what does that tell you about how PHP passes? Remember, there are two concepts of passing. There's passing by value and passing by reference. Which one is this? Value. We're taking the values 10 and 20 and making copies and giving that off to the function. As hopefully I'm driven home the point here that x and y are not the same variables as a and b. We've got a and b over here. We've got x and y over here. X and y over here. The copy, the values in there, 10 and 20, are copied over to a and b. A and b are swapped, leaving x and y, the originals, completely alone. So by default, all parameters are passed by value. Right? However, you have the option of passing them by reference. Now, if this were C, to make a regular variable into a pointer variable, into a pointer reference variable, how would I end up doing that? It would look like something like int star. It's just the opposite. It's the referencing operator, right? And now this has changed it so that it is passed by reference. There are no pointers, explicit pointers in PHP, so I don't have to make any changes down here to the swap. But I'll go ahead and run it and show you that that's actually now swapped, right? Because I'm no longer taking copies 10 and 20 and copying them into A and B. I am making A and B point to X and Y, right? So that they share the variables between those two, between that function call. Yeah?
Well, we don't need to change the thing at line 17.
Exactly.
That's kind of nice.
Well,
Relatively speaking.
yes. This is not necessarily something you would want to do anyway, but it comes into play when you start passing arrays, right? So, function add one. We'll take an array of say, we'll assume that to be integers, and we'll go ahead and go through that array, an array of 0 or 4. We'll assume that it's a regular old array, 0 index, no holes. For each one of these things, for I is less than, how did we determine the size of an array? Count is one way. Size of is an alias to it, I++. And we'll just say that array sub I is equal to array sub I. Actually, we'll just zero it. Well, no, I called it add one, so let's go ahead and stick with it. Plus 1, right? So we're just going to take an array and add 1 to everything, okay? Let's go ahead and create an array equals array of 10, 20, 30. Just keep it small. That's another way that you can do an array. If you don't care about the key to the value pairs matching, you don't have to use the arrow syntax. You can just put them all into a collection like this. And let's go ahead and use print r so that we don't have to do too much heavy lifting here to see the contents of that array. You do have to spell it right, though. Let's go ahead and call that function add one. All right. So is it actually going to add 1 to each thing in the array? 10, 20, 30, 10, 20, 30. No, why? By default, everything is passed by value, meaning that an entire copy of that array was made and passed to that function. The original array is not changed at all. If we wanted the original array to be changed, we would have to pass it by reference using an ampersand in front of it. And when we do this, now it is changed. Because we're not passing a copy, we're passing the original. And this is really important if you have a very large array, because if you have an array holding 4 gigabytes of data or something, and you copy that entire thing onto the stack, it's not going to work. Yeah?
So is it like what kind of this happens under the hood? So when you pass a variable to a function, do you pass basically only the pointer to the variable function decides what to do with it, whether like to use the value or use
No, if you just give the, like in this case, A is being passed by value, B is being passed by reference. So the syntax that you use when you declare the function determines what happens. Down here, it doesn't matter. You don't have to do anything special when you call the function, only when you declare the function.
So you just decide what to use in your function.
Yeah, how you want to design your function, right? So if I'm going to give you an array and I expect you to make changes to it because I expect you to add 1 to it all, then I need an ampersand there. But if I give you an array so that you can just sum everything up there, I'm not expecting you to make changes to it. I just want you to sum up all the numbers in that array. In fact, I don't want you to make changes to it. So maybe I do want to pass it by value. Right? Okay, there was another question?
How did you know that array would be 0 index?
Because I made it that way. By default, that's what happens.
Oh, okay.
I didn't provide my own custom keys. And so if here I want 10, 20, 30 in this array. By default, it's okay, I'll put that 0, 1, 2. We're done.
Oh.
So the difference is whether or not you put an ampersand there. And especially if you're coming from a C background, yes, it is exactly the opposite of how you would do it in C. Again, don't ask me, I'm not Rasmus Lerdorf. In fact, I've had the worst time with Markdown and other lexers. They never understand this in PHP. You can see it right here. I've even told it that it's PHP code and it's having problems with this. In my book, in my CS1 book, I have the same damn problems. I cannot get the ampersands in PHP to format correctly. So don't ask me why.
It's the same.
All right, that's functions. We're sorting. Oh yeah. Again, I don't know why you chose the dollar sign. It's weird. But you can also see, like in some languages that allow you to use the dollar sign, that you can tell a PHP developer, and then they go to another language and they start using dollar signs everywhere. And like, this is not PHP code. Like JavaScript, I think JavaScript allows you to do something, use a dollar sign. And so you can sometimes see PHP developers jump over to JavaScript and then, oh, I can use the dollar sign. I'm going to continue, right? You don't have to. In PHP, the only reason you do it in PHP is because you have to. That's part of the language. There's no reason to kill your pinky finger all the time with Shift and up 4 every single time you want to type that. Maybe he had much better fingers, but especially if you get older and you start to get arthritis or something like that. That's maybe there are no old PHP developers because of that.
It's the price you pay.
All right, let's see. Okay. Let's talk about error handling. There are exceptions. PHP does support exceptions. Actually, only one. Right. Now this might be different in more modern PHP, like 7 and up, but there's only one exception, and it's called exception. Right. So let me go ahead and show you in PHP code what I mean by that here. You can throw a new exception just like Java. You can throw a new exception, and I believe that it is case insensitive. So don't quote me on that though. I think you can do it like this too. And here's the message, and provide a message. Message of what happened. Right. Or what you were about to do. For example, let's go ahead and get rid of all this stuff. Now this is modern PHP, so who knows if it's going to work. Let's say A is equal to 10 and B is equal to 0. And we'll check if our denominator is going to be 0 equals 0 for strict comparison operations. If our denominator is 0, we will not divide by 0. Otherwise, if it's not 0, then of course we can go C is equal to A divided by B. Right? But if we're about to divide by 0, we can go ahead and throw a new exception. Cannot divide by 0. and run this. Uncaught exception, we cannot divide by 0. So you can throw things, and again, I think that this is case insensitive. Yep, it's case insensitive. Why? Because functions are case insensitive. This is, I don't know if this is an actual class in PHP or not. I'd have to look into that. But in any case, you can go ahead and use try catches, right? Do I have an example here? Oh yeah, here's just the syntax for doing so. Here's potentially dangerous code, right? And if that ends up throwing an exception, you can catch it. And there's only one type of exception. With Java, you have an entire slew of types of exceptions. In fact, you have throwables, you have checked exceptions and unchecked exceptions, and even then, you have runtime exceptions, null pointer exceptions, number format exceptions, file not found exceptions, right? Any different types of exceptions, they have semantic meaning because that particular error happened. If you have a file not found exception, you might want to handle that one way. If you have a null pointer exception, you might want to handle that a different way. In PHP, it's all one exception. So regardless of what you would have to end up doing is you'd have to check to see what the message was. If the message was this type of message, then do this. If the message was this type of message, then do that, right? And so you'd have this big if, else if condition inside of your catch instead of catch, 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 catch. It's still messy code, but it's 6 of one, half a dozen of another, right? Print exception occurred. Dot and then get message. I think that's really the only thing that you can do with it. You can get the message, and then depending on the content of the message, right? Oops. Dot. So E was never catch E. Oh, okay. Yeah, maybe. I get. Let's go ahead and just take this. Move it in. Nope. What line number are you complaining about? Line 19. Huh, catch E. So modern Java exception. E. No way is this. Okay. Old school PHP that you'd be developing on CSE. New school if you want to use REPL or 7 and up, right, apparently. Right. Your mileage may vary. I'll go ahead and put it in the way that it is right now so that you have it in your notes. But understand that there might be some differences between the languages, or between the versions, I should say. Oh. I'll just put a note here. Older would be catch E. Right, there we go. So there might have they might have some more strict typing in more modern PHP. Let's talk about sorting. Right. Sorting is actually pretty easy. Of course, the principle of sorting is there are hundreds of different sorting algorithms. Which one do I write? The answer is none of them. You don't roll your own. You use what is built into the language itself. So if I've got an array here of elements for just random numbers here, at least as random as my fingers are pressing, right? Then let's go ahead and sort it. Right. Let's print it before to see that it's unsorted. And we'll print it after to see that it is sorted. Oops. Still don't want to save. Right. Oops, what did I do wrong? Oh, array. There we go. All right. So there's the original array. Dang it. There. As I created it, and then it sorts in ascending order. Okay. What if I want descending order, or what if I want different behavior, or what if I don't even have numbers? What if instead I have strings? Zebra, apple, banana, apple, apples. There we go. Okay, you tell me what's going to come first among all those strings once I sort it. Uppercase A, apple, and then what? Uppercase A, apples, uppercase B, banana, and then lowercase a, apple, lowercase z, zebra. Good, we got it. What if I have mixed types? 123, 904, 12, hello. Give me something else to throw it for a loop. Let's try to break it. Another, oh, good. That's array with A. We'll be easy on it in ABC. Let's go with 90 and let's see, 100. There we go. So 90 and 100 as strings. Which one would come first? 100. It's not in order if we treat them as strings and they remain as strings. So let's go ahead and find out what's going on here. Zebras first. Oh, sorry, that's before. There we go. I was really going to say, what the hell? That would have really thrown me for a loop there. 100 as a string. 1, 2, 3, that was a string as well. 1, 2, hello. That makes sense lexicographically because 1, 2, they match. 3, numbers come before capital letters, and so then capital letters come after. And then, of course, 90, that's lexicographic. All that makes sense. This all makes sense because that's what it was before. And then 904, numbers. So strings come before numbers. Okay. And then arrays come after all those. Right? And it didn't sort this array, by the way. Just to prove that to you, I'll put Z in here. It doesn't recursively sort all of its members. A, Z, B, D, C. Right? Okay, that's how it does mixed types. Yeah?
What about a double? Would it go before?
Ooh, good question.
Or would it go,
3.14.
after, like, any integer so that
Let's go ahead and try.
bigger than-
Looks like it. No, that's unsorted. That is. Whoa. Yeah, it really screwed it up then. So the takeaway on this is, if you're going to use the blind sorting algorithm, make sure you don't have mixed types. What's going on here? PHP sort. There we go.
That was the Scarlet Bird.
If two members compares equals, their relative order is undefined. Right? So elements will be arranged from lowest to highest when this function is completed. What happens when it's a mixed type? So it's not even in the documentation, it looks like. Although you can go ahead and provide it some flags, some extra direction. For example, sort regular, compare items normally. The details are provided in the comparison operator section. So whatever rules are going on here, you're going to have to RTM, read the manual. What are the rules of that are coming into play here, right? If you wanted to do it just numerically, purely numeric, then it would take all those, I believe it would take all those strings and try to juggle them as numeric values. What would it do with the array? I have no idea. Probably it would coerce it into 1 because it's not an empty array. Empty arrays are 0. Non-empty arrays are 1 or something like that. Again, these are really, really low level. I don't know what these rules are and you shouldn't have to know what these rules are. Just avoid this entirely. Don't use mixed types, right? If you have an array, then the array should be all numbers. The array should be all strings and you're good to go, right? You can't, otherwise you're going to have to do a deep dive into find out what actually happens in that case, okay? But otherwise, if you give it easy stuff, like just numbers, then it will behave, right? There. Come on. All right, I don't know what's not running. Oh, you know what? I think I have, there, clear that. There we go. If you just provide easy stuff, it'll behave. That says nothing about what if I want a reversed sorting algorithm. Right? For that, let me go ahead and look at find sort. Is there no link to back to the main page? Okay, fine. PHP sorting. Sorting arrays. There we go. So that's just one of many. Right? Let me go ahead and zoom in here. That's not what I want. There we go. So there's a sort, AR sort, KR sort, K sort, nat sort, R sort. Hey, R sort is reversed sort. Maybe that's what I wanted. So let's go back over here to REPL, and I don't want sort, I want it in descending order. There we go. 67, 7, 6, dot, 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 dot. All right. If you want a natural sort or whatever, blah, blah, blah. The other most important one is usort. This is a user-defined sorting value. Right? What do we mean by that? It means that you provide a callback. Right? In fact, let me go back over here to sort, the documentation. There. Do you notice anything? How is the array passed? What's that ampersand mean? It's passed by reference, so you know that it's going to change your array. Right? Well, you expect that because it's going to sort it. Right? But then the other most important one here is usort. Right? And this means user, you sort it. Right? Now it will sort it. All you need to do is provide it a comparator for how to order things. Remember, a comparator returns something negative, positive, or 0, depending on the relative order of things. Yeah?
Is it like returning a boolean whether it was successful or not?
It does not return any. Why does it return a Boolean? That's a good question. We have to RTM, read the document. Returns true on success, false on failure. I failed this. I don't know why it would fail. Say what?
Like how it did with our double.
It might. I don't know if that's a failure. I don't know if PHP would consider that a failure or not. We would have to. Why would it here a failure? It doesn't tell you how it could possibly fail. If it just didn't feel like it that day. But anyway, let's go ahead and go with, let's go ahead and stick with this, and I'll show you how you could do reverse sorting, but customizable. Right? So I'm going to create a function, and this is for integers and descending order. So int desc CMP, or CMP for comparator. Integers is what it's for, and descending, right? And it takes A and B, not by reference. Just remember, you're looking at these things and you're saying A comes first or B comes first. So I'm going to return something negative, something positive, or 0. Right? And so all I have to do is check. If A is less than B, then I just need to return something negative. Right? Else, if A is greater than B, then I'll return something positive. Otherwise, I'll return 0 because they're equal. Now, usort requires that callback. Right? Callback because you're passing a function to another function, so that function can call it. So it can call it back. Right? Now, normally you would do this in Java, or sorry, in C you would do this by passing in the function identifier, right? Same idea in PHP, but it has to be a string identifier. A string. I want you to use that function as a callback. And when I do this, it should have the same behavior as before. Let's go ahead and clear this out so that we don't confuse ourselves. There we go. Oh, sorry. Usort. This should be descending, right? 5, 10. No. Okay, so I could rename it ascending, or I could change my actual code. I got mixed around. Sorry, there we go. Let's get rid of that again. There we go. Was that what the hand was raised for? I was doing it wrong.
No, I was actually wondering, since functions didn't have like a defined type, like it's not a void function, it's not an int function, could you potentially make the return something slightly different each time? Like
Yes.
return
I could return negative 1.5. I could return positive 1, so double an integer and then 0. Obviously, that's not going to work, though, right? Let's find out. Do I have any duplicates? Yeah, I have a duplicate here, so let's see what happens. All right, we got lucky. Let's put more duplicates in all over the place. Okay, we're getting lucky here.
That's pretty good.
I think we're getting lucky here because 0, when you when you juggle it, it's gonna what's gonna happen?
Oh.
0.
It's gonna be 0.
Let's try it like here, 1. And this certainly will screw it up, I imagine. Yeah, that's not gonna sort. Right. So yes, you can have mixed type inputs and mixed typed outputs. Exactly. You shouldn't do that. All right. We could, of course, go back to the other example that we had, and if I do have an array of strings, and I don't care about casing, right? That this is an array of apples, apple, and banana. Oh, here's 0. No, cantaloupe. Is that how you spell cantaloupe? I don't know. Zebra, we'll put that first, and then apple at the end, and banana. There we go. Oh. There. Now, if I want a U sort of this, where I ultimately ignore the casing conventions, then I have to make that function. Right? Let's go ahead and create a function, a comparator function here for strings. So now I'm assuming that A and B are strings. Compare strings, ignore case. Right? So what I'm going to do is, normally you would call strcmp in C, right? What I'm going to do here is I'm going to call str case cmp, and I'm simply going to return that value. Whatever that says as far as those strings goes, I'm going to go ahead and pass that on through. And so let's try this out. Oh, you know what? I need the name of this function right here. There. Apple, apple, banana, cantaloupe, 0, regardless of their upper or lowercase. In fact, did I even need to write that function? All I could have done is pass in str case cmp directly, I believe. Yay. It's already written for me. Remember that passing it by passing a function in C, that would be passing a function pointer. But in PHP here, you pass it as a string. If you pass in a non-existent function, usort expects parameter 2, foo is not found in a valid function name. So it looks like it refuses to do anything, and it's just a warning. I'm not going to sort because I don't know how. Right? Question?
Do you need to put functions at the top, just so I can see? Or
No, because they're all hoisted at the end of the day. I'll go ahead and move this down here, and it'll work just fine. Or I mean, it'll work as well as it was before. And again, I don't need that function. Now, you can, of course, you don't want everything in the same PHP file. So I'm not sure how to do it with REPL. Like, I'd have to actually log in to have multiple files. But you can put some of your PHP code in one file and another in another file. Like, you could put all your financial utilities and financial utilities.php. And how do you bring them in? You can include once. Include. Where is that coming from? C. All right. Yeah, LaTeX probably got it from C. I'm not sure. But anyway, include once. Here, if I've got an external PHP file, utils.php or something, and it'll bring it in. So that way, why do we have a once? The include is from C, right? Hash include, and then you include the math library. Why include once? Well, if you've got a file that includes another file and includes another file, right? And this file, and each one of them includes a third file, you don't want to include a file multiple times, because if you do define a function duplicate, that is a problem. Cannot redeclare what you've already done. In fact, that's a fatal error. You can't have two functions with the same name there. So if you include something once, twice, that's basically created two functions with the same name, and you can't do it. So that's why it's include once. It goes through and says, I'll include everything unless I've already included it, in which case I'll ignore it. So convenience. You can include external PHP files so that when you write your functions, you can throw those into a different file. Now for your assignment, I don't think that we want you to do that. Well, we want you to just put everything into one file. You can use, in fact, you should use doc-style comments. When we get to Java, we will kind of somewhat expect you to use doc-style comments, where you've got slash, star, star, and then a vertical line of stars here. You can even see the editor supports it automatically. This compares integers and in descending order. You can, now because of mixed types here, you can, if you really want to, do some enforcement. For example, is int, I think, PHP is int, or check to see if it's an integer, is int. Yep. And if it's not an integer, then you can throw an exception if you want, right? If is int a, or I should be going is not int b, then I'll throw an exception, throw new exception. I'm only good for integers, right? And it's an uncaught exception. Oh, well, I've got to get rid of that, sorry. Oh, and then I'm not doing it, of course, I guess. Sorry. Scrolling is terrible. Here. 10. There we go. That should end up throwing that exception. No? If it's not an integer, I'm only good for integers. Int case CMP. Send. Okay. I don't know why it's not throwing this. I'm only good. Throw new exception. Okay, I don't know why it's not doing it, but. Oh no, it is. Oh, it's dying because of this probably. There we go. Now run it. There. Uncaught exception. I'm only good for integers. Yeah. I should I'm spoiled here, and I'm assuming that it's clearing out the output each time I run it, but it's not. It's a running output. Okay. Any questions? So at this point, you have everything that you need to do assignment 1. Assignment 1, the first one is basic I/O with body surface area. You've got your math library to do all those math functions. Your starter code, of course, has an associative array for protein translation. Otherwise, it's just substrings and iterating through a collection. The game report, you could do it with everything that we've got so far, right? If you create an associative array of all the publishers and then have that map to the number of games that they've created or whatever the report requires, right? That would be pretty easy and straightforward. On Tuesday when we come back, I'll show you how you might want to, say, create a class that represents a game, a class that represents a publisher, a class that represents a console or whatever. And if you want to go that route, that's perfectly fine. That's a little bit of overkill, especially in PHP to do this. If it were Java, yeah, I'd say, yeah, go ahead and do that. But otherwise, PHP, you don't need to do that. But otherwise, on Tuesday, I'll quickly go over that. And then we'll maybe do an exercise. I do this one too much, but it's popular. Here, break my password. I'll make sure that all the notes are copied over there. So since we have enough time here, I'll motivate it for next week. Passwords are often stored as hashed strings. One such bad hash function supported in PHP directly is SHA-1. Actually, I would say that it's bad because you don't want just blind hashes. You want to use a key derivation function for hashing passwords, like PBK-DF2. PBK, password base key derivation function version 2. I've got the acronym in my head, I just have to remember what it is. At least SHA-1 is much better than MD5, which is used all over the place and is completely breakable. But for example, if I call this function SHA-1, it's supported directly in PHP, and I give it the password, right? Then it'll end up as this hash right here. And so what happens is we don't store the password. We don't store this string directly in, say, our database or something like that. Instead, we store this hashed value. So that next time you come back to the website, you type in your password, and then that we hash it again, and we see, does the hash value match this hash value? If so, then go ahead and grant them access. That way, we're never storing passwords directly. We never store the password, right? We only store the hash of the password. Now, the problem is, of course, if you want to break a password, you would need the password to create the hash so that you can give it, give them the password and get in. Or you would need some other string that maps to the same password. That's called a pre-image attack. Or you could say, this is not a very smart user. Maybe they've got a common password, like password, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? So then what you can do is call it a rainbow attack, where I'm assuming that they're going to use some sort of a dictionary word. So I can run through all the words in a dictionary, hash them all, and see if it matches this hashed password here. Because when you break into a system, you end up not stealing passwords. You end up stealing hashes, right? And so what was their password so that I can get into the system? You have to figure that out just with only the hash, with only this value right here. And so you can start guessing. Was their password 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8? Nope, that didn't match. Was their password 1, 2, 3, 4? Oh, there, that's it, right? And of course, on the internet, there are repositories of the 10,000 most commonly used passwords by bad users. And you can pre-compute all of these things, and that's what's called a rainbow table. You can take the dictionary, or your top 10,000 most commonly used passwords. You can pre-compute all these hashes, sort them, and then all you have to do is do a quick lookup, right? Is this in the collection? If not, okay, now we have to start guessing, right? And then that's when you have a loop that tries a bunch of things like a dictionary word appended with a number. And then you run that number from 1 up to 2,000, right? Because, of course, it's all his birthdays, right? The year that I was born, right? Or the current year, right? And then maybe you throw in some randomization there that, maybe they threw in an exclamation point at the beginning or something like that, right? And so you can actually quickly break some of these passwords if you try standard passwords. So here's my password, and honestly, I have no idea what it is. So we're going to have to break it together here. There's my hash, right? Hint, my password is a dictionary word from that with a 4-digit number appended, right? So that'll be our exercise on Tuesday. It'll involve everything that we've covered so far, right? It'll involve file I/O because we have to open up that dictionary with hundreds of thousands of words. We have to process it. Actually, this might be too hard. 100,000 times 4 digits. How many numbers are in 4 digits? 10,000. So 10,000 times 100,000. Let's say there are 100,000 words in there. That's going to be several billion possibilities. I don't know how easy this is going to be. But I could guarantee you that it would run within probably a few hours, maybe a day or so. And that's all it would take to break this password. And that's a relatively weak password. So that's why they say use a combination of letters, numbers, and a phrase, right? What's the famous XKCD? XKCD. Oh, actually, there are two XKCDs passwords. The one is how passwords are actually broken. If we can look this up, here's the password generator is probably what I want. Okay, so even this is bad because there's not much entropy there. But what he suggests is like correct horse battery staple, right? Because that's easy. You want your password to be personally memorable, right? Otherwise, you're always looking it up, and which means that you get into the bad habit of writing it down, and writing it down means that it's not secure at all, because if somebody knows where you wrote it down, they're in, right? So you do want a combination of a phrase to make it long, intersperse numbers that are meaningful to you, maybe then a randomization of some sort, like even the current year, because they don't know necessarily when you set your password last, right? But you want it easy to remember, but you want it hard to guess. There's another one, not this one. Yeah, there. Doorstep, blasphemy, unknown, legal. And then you could come up with some sort of a mnemonic device to remember that or something, right? That's what the comedy of this thing that's a battery staple, correct, right? Correct horse battery staple, right? So all you have to do is conjure up the image of a horse saying that it's a battery staple, which is kind of memorable, I guess. I don't know. But doorstep, blasphemy, unknown, legal. Uprising, surreal, gratuity, moonscape. Lazy, plunging, chokehold, starting. Faculty, sensuous, exodus, drowsily, right? That is almost, because now if you use 4 dictionary words, now if your dictionary is 100,000 words, now it's 100,000 to the 4th power number of possibilities that you have to run through, right? And now it's, weeks or months or years instead. Unless you break the hashing function by, breaking it with mathematics and stuff. And nobody's broken really hot. SHA-1 is broken, but not for collision attacks, not pre-image attacks. Don't worry what that means though. But the other XKCD that I thought would come up that we'll end with is XKCD, how passwords are really broken. No. Security. Yeah, there we go. That's what I wanted. So his laptop's encrypted. Let's build $1 million cluster to crack it. No good. It's 4,000-bit RSA encryption. His laptop's encrypted. How it would actually work is drug him and hit him with a $5 wrench until he tells us what it is. So that's how passwords are actually broken. That's way more effective. Properly implemented password scheme will never be broken mathematically. But a $5 wrench does the job just fine. All right, I'll see you on Tuesday.